time aboard. This is the Miles to Go podcast. And now here's your host, Ed Pizza.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Miles to Go podcast. We're going to get extra nerdy about the airline industry today as we're joined by Seth Miller, who has been a frequent guest on the show and is the co-host of the Dots, Lines, and Destination podcast as well. And for the first time in the history of the Miles to Go podcast, he also represents the first elected official we've ever had on the show. Welcome to the show, the Honorable Seth Miller.
Gentlemen, pleasure to be back. I think one more of my punch card's full and I get a free sandwich, right?
I don't know, but I'm digging that.
Inflation. You need at least 2 or 3 more punches.
My favorite thing is the Air Inuit swag, I think, from that trip that y'all tried to take a few weeks ago with the gravel kit, man. Bummed. I don't think you got to take it from following on the social media.
No, it was, that was a bummer. It was, yeah. I keep debating this one. Like, we got on the plane taxied, we hit 108 knots. Like, we were not quite nose off the ground, but we were close.
I would say ground taxiing tests are even more impressive than flying. So
yeah, I'm still pretty sure I can't count it as a trip though. So, but
you've been on one more plane with a gravel kit than I have.
That's fair.
The true Av geek.
I will say it was one of the interesting things about it because it's such an old plane. I mean, the overhead bins are tiny. Let's be very clear here. Like carry-on bags that we would think of today do not fit, but the sort of arched ceiling effect that you get now with the Boeing Sky Interior or the Airbus Airspace cabin idea is way more pronounced in those older planes. You actually have an open, airy, like high ceiling feeling even on a single aisle plane. It's a super, almost disorienting at this point to see that. You get them, and like it took me a while to realize even what was going on and why it felt different.
Why am I comfortable on a single aisle plane? Oh, that's right. It's old.
It's old. It's got padding in the seats. There's space overhead. Yeah.
Ashtrays. You could just.
Well, sadly, we were all supposed to be together this week, and Mr. Kerr couldn't make it to Chicago. But Seth, you and I spent a little bit of time together at the Freddie Awards, which we'll probably talk about next week just because there's so many more pressing things going on in the world right now. But what we're going to try and cover today is we're definitely going to try and cover the situation at Newark because it seems to be at a level of urgency that I think, I guess I would say I was a little bit surprised by, which probably says more about me than about what's going on there because Newark has been sort of a hot mess for a while. We want to talk about Wi-Fi because A, that's an area of expertise for you, and B, it just seems to be that every airline, as you said in pre-show, has a little something cooking for us right now. And if we get time, there's United and JetBlue, there's the fight over American and United at Chicago. There's just so much to cover right now. But a little bit of housekeeping. I can't even talk today. Let's try this again.
It's all good. It's fine.
Let's just mix up all the different podcasts. Email us, ed@pizzainmotion.com. You can text us or leave us a voicemail, 571-293-6659. He is at Kerr Points on all those social media channels. Mr. Miller, you have way too many channels for me. So what's Blue Sky? Because I haven't memorized Blue Sky handles yet.
Wandrme, WANDRME.PaxEx.Aero.
God, that's so long. Okay.
Fully qualified, baby. We know exactly where you're coming from.
You don't have to do anything for SEO anymore, so you can just write whatever you want.
SEO, that cute little term from the teens.
Can I start with a very exciting thing and get Mr. Honorable Seth Miller's opinion on this? Because I've been waiting for 2.5 years for the news that we got 48 hours ago. Seth, as you may or may not know, I think you do, I've been commuting between Atlanta and New York for almost 6 years now.
Yes. I
had the greatest experience ever for the first 4 years where I would fly American as an executive platinum and get upgraded 5 days in advance into seat 4A on the Embraer 175. Ladies and gentlemen, as of 48 hours ago, that route is back starting September 3rd with 6 daily flights on the E175, and I cannot tell you how excited I am for so many reasons. Seth, I was always curious when American took this route away because every day I flew it, it was full. Now, that might have been a lot of non-revs flying on it, but I thought, man, these flights are not empty. How are they getting rid of this? How are they, not trying to compete with Delta whatsoever? Why do you think they took it away for 2.5 years, and why are they coming back heavy-handed with 6 daily flights on this route, which, again, I just could not be more excited about.
6 is a lot. If I remember correctly, when they took it away, they gave it to JetBlue.
They did.
JetBlue did start launching it. That was part of the Northeast Alliance that was the JetBlue partnership with American that eventually was ruled illegal. And
did not last very long.
So I think that's part of it. Coming back with 6 is a lot, more than I would have expected. I will say I think American has made a point of late, and as Ed alluded to, we might talk about this a little with Chicago as well, trying to get sort of back in the game and be a leader in certain markets. And in this case, leader in the business travel space, which the Atlanta to New York City area market absolutely is. It's one of the busiest in the country, and not just for the onward connecting traffic. So, I think when you look at what American needs / wants to do, right? We no more Vasu there. So we actually are going to try to recruit business travel again, some things like that. We're not just depending on the Sun Belt for our future growth. There's a lot of shifts there that have happened in the last couple of years. And I think that is a big reason. That's part of why the 6, at all is because the JetBlue deal is gone. But the 6, I think, is based on that.
Yeah, I'll be honest. If it was only 1 or 2 a day, I probably wouldn't be able to mess with it based on how much my schedule changes. But I'm excited about it. I have absolutely no American status or loyalty points whatsoever. I have to get back on that train as soon as I can, get a little status match over. We've been talking about how my luck with Delta this year. I'm batting almost 50% delays now, flying Delta, and I'm just kind of over it. So, and I'd much rather just collect American miles than Sky Miles if I'm going to be flying for business. So, really excited about this. Hoping to get back in that front cabin, or again, I just love flying in Embraer more than I do a 1999 752 or a 1998 738 that Delta still got flying around. So, could be more excited.
Don't forget the 717s.
Yeah, well, they do the Newark route still on that. Which
I was going to say, do they still fly, or are they just scheduled?
They're scheduled. Yes, they're definitely scheduled.
My favorite game to play is to send our buddy Howie and Ed screenshots of the latest Delta maintenance delays and ask which airplane is this, and it's either a 752 or 717 every time.
Every time.
Yeah, like Delta has played this game with older planes for a while, and for the most part, it's worked out for them in terms of what their economics look like. But there definitely are some long in the tooth planes right now. I'd say 2 things here. To your point, Kerr, about 6 flights a day: 6 a.m. departure, 9:30 a.m., noon, 2:30, 5 o'clock, 7:30. Other than the 12 o'clock, that's a schedule that's tuned for business travel. And I guess you could argue that the noon probably lines up well with red eyes that are coming in overnight into Atlanta, and then onward connections to New York from there. So they cover it really well from a business perspective. And it does seem, what's the best word I can use here? Predictable that you would jump in with this, because as I texted our itinerary to Mr. Miller, the Honorable Mr. Miller earlier, I said I had on the bullet point, Kerr having a wet dream that AA brought back ATL-LGA.
It's
I'm going to be honest. When I saw that, I actually wasn't sure if the route was back or you were just really hoping for it.
Both. It's Terminal B, which, not that I care much about lounge access anymore since Delta's capped it, but there are options in Terminal B if I do have to catch a meeting, which again is the only reason I care about these kinds of things, or if you catch a delay, there's a lot of things there. I'm just super excited about this. But I am curious, what is the latest now with Americans' Wi-Fi plans, and what are they going to do to the Embraers, as they just announced recently that finally free Wi-Fi for all. Granted, it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
So free for all coming in 2026. So January. So you got to get through the rest of this year first. So that'll be a bit. But it's not just announced, but they are finally making good progress on it. American, on their regional jets, the 70-seaters, is installing Wi-Fi multi-orbit satellite solution from Intelsat. So Intelsat is the company that GoGo became when it spun off its commercial aviation thing. So still GoGo, if you will, but it's Intelsat. And the big difference is the system that used to be just on, basically cell towers talking to the plane that did not have enough spectrum, did not have enough bandwidth, has been replaced by a satellite solution. New antenna on top of the airplane. It's multi-orbit. So LEO and GEO, which is fun words, low Earth orbit and geosynchronous orbit. Most satellites internet that you've used today or to date has been the geosynchronous stuff. That's satellites that sit 30,000 kilometers, if I remember, 25,000 miles, some way the hell out there, right? Round trip ping time is like 650 milliseconds. It's no matter how much bandwidth you have, there's still a latency challenge. And so if you're streaming video, kind of doesn't matter. You get a little buffering to start and then it just works. If you're doing something more real time, then I don't think anyone should be trying to like gaming on an airplane and expecting that they're going to have a good experience. But text-based chatting, please don't make video calls on airplanes.
Please.
VPNs, quite frankly, things like that, remote desktop type stuff, work-related things, they work better. The LEO system has a latency under 200 milliseconds. The Virgin American is installing often under 150. If you've taken a flight on Hawaiian lately that has the Starlink installed, or Qatar has it active these days as well, or JSX, you've had that low Earth orbit experience. Certainly in terms of the latency, the Starlink latency is even lower than what Intelsat is delivering for American. But in my experience, there's not a particularly noticeable difference as a user between the sort of 100 that you get on Starlink and the 150 to 200 you're getting on Intelsat. So between a lot more bandwidth and the lower latency, those regional jets are smoking fast now on internet.
Is that all the way through the Embraer fleet as well? Or is that on the CRs?
They are installing it now. They're over 100 fitted. They've got a lot of regional jets. That will be done by the end of the year because, among other things, the GoGo air-to-ground network that they use today is going away. So that goes away at the end of the year. There's a hard deadline related to FCC rules and things like that. But we are going to see by the end of the year, it'll be the Americans, all their 70-seaters. So CRJs and ERJs, the bigger ones, the 50-seaters, which I think they still have a chunk of, not so much, but the bigger regional jets, you should be in good shape.
That is great news. Probably my only complaint on when I was commuting that way was the Wi-Fi just pretty much didn't work, which, by the way, I'm completely fine with just listening to podcasts and tuning out for a couple hours if I have to. But it will be nice to have that option to actually get some work done.
And it'll be free by the time it's there. So,
all good stuff. Okay, that's all I have to say. I was just super excited. Yeah. Finally, some great news here about.
If I can keep ranting about Wi-Fi for a hot second.
No, yeah, I think
please do.
Yeah.
Air Canada installing the same system on its regional jets. I actually was up in Canada last week. The airline brought me up there to actually try it out, so I got to use it on a couple of their planes, a couple of flights. Also now free throughout the Americas, so that's pretty cool. They similarly are installing it on all of their regional jets. It's on their CRJs to start. Their ERJs are coming later, which is interesting. Certification, regulatory crap going on up there. They're going to put it on their prop planes out of Billy Bishop, downtown Toronto, as well.
Oh, wow.
It's not going to be the same system, as best I can tell. They haven't said explicitly what it is yet, but it'll be a similarly low Earth orbit, fast system on those props for the hour-long flights between basically downtown Toronto and Ottawa or Montreal. United has its first Starlink plane installed within. Yeah, they're coming soon to activate. I'm checking the date here. It's supposed to be sometime this month. The first plane will actually flipped on for passengers to use. As Starlink goes live on United, that will also be free because Starlink has a rule in its contracts with the airlines that says if you're using our system, it has to be free. And then Delta is well into its free rollout for its regional jets and 717s. Those are the planes still sort of left behind, if you will, on the old systems. Those two are being converted. The first few regional jets have been retrofit now for Delta as well and are expected to go live again imminently. Same problem with the FCC rules with the old GoGo hardware. The one caveat on that is the 717s are going to be the last ones to convert.
Are they just not getting rid of these planes? They're really going to convert all the Wi-Fi?
They're going to convert the Wi-Fi on them. Yeah. And they're putting an even different, newer system on those than they are on the other regional jets. And that's not going to start until this fall and might trickle into the new year. So there may be a period in Q1 2026 where some 717s are dark. And Alaska Airlines, I guess, is the other one that's doing the same system as Air Canada and American, or is supposed to be.
So I fly to Toronto 2 or 3 times a year for business and take the nonstop on Air Canada from Atlanta into Toronto, and it's always the CRJ that they have on their express jets. I will tell you, wildly different interiors depending on which plane you get for that. Some have in-flight entertainment on the Embraers and the seatback, all gone.
That's going away with the new Wi-Fi on their regional jets.
So now you just streamed your own device.
Yeah, you got a metal plate basically they're putting in. It's not aesthetically pleasing, but if you smash your head into it, you probably won't die. So that's kind of the point.
It was really, really old in-flight entertainment, but I remember the first time a couple years ago where I sat down in Embraer and there was in-flight entertainment or CRJ, and I was like, "What? This is awesome!" In addition to your meal that you get, of course, that you're never going to see on an American carrier. But it's a great way to commute up to Toronto. So excited for some fast new Wi-Fi there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time for customers who are looking for Wi-Fi on planes. That being said, I guess, setting aside Starlink, which I think, has probably proven that it can be okay with enough people on the plane, given that it seems to have rolled out well on Hawaiian. Seth, what's your opinion on what bandwidth is going to be like for customers once it's free?
Good question, good challenge. And I think one of the things about Hawaiian that we still don't know, or not Starlink, that we still don't know just based on Hawaiian or JSX coming online, and that Qatar is starting to tell us, and United very much will tell us, is what happens when you're near a hub. what happens when you've got 100 airplanes all
Right.
online in the same tiny little spot, right? I mean, over the Pacific, there's 20 or 30 planes using this and 10 or 20 satellites. So you've got basically a satellite to yourself as Hawaiian on a plane. And so,
Right.
all that bandwidth into one airplane, fine, cool, great. When you start stacking more and more planes into these spots, that's where there are questions about how well LEO will perform. And we've seen it with Starlink limiting the number of subscribers in any, geographic area on the ground.
Right.
Same challenge in the air. So I think that's going to be the challenge more than the hardware on the airplanes and getting, that side of things. But from what I have seen, it varies. But, I don't want to say when I got on my Air Canada flight the other day, I did not get a 100 megabits per second speed test. I got steady performance of 20 megabits downloading a 1 gig file, though, right? That's a massive amount of data over a steady pace.
Yeah.
And it didn't zigzag. It stayed pretty steady
Right.
in terms of performance. So there is better traffic shaping, better, more consistent experience, things like that. And honestly, you're not doing anything that needs more than 20 megabits. I mean, even I shouldn't have been downloading a 1 gig file. I do it because it's a fun thing to right.
Is this the latest legislative bills from the state of New Hampshire that you're trying to
There are
do?
1,000 of them in any given year. So, but they're just text. It's not that big of a data file. But yeah, no, I think there are some questions about how that's going to play out. One of the big sort of debates within the industry between the different vendors is the sort of Starlink LEO only. We don't need other stuff. We've got plenty of bandwidth. It doesn't matter.
Right.
First is the multi-orbit folks who are like, listen, if there's too much congestion on that LEO satellite, we can flip a switch, or not even switch, but like the systems on board will automatically flip. And there's 3 or 4 other satellites. Again, higher latency because you're up here on, which one is it? This finger. You're on my GEO satellite here, as opposed to my LEO satellites down here. But when you switch up to GEO, higher latency, but it does work. You got more capacity. You can overlay and sort of have all those planes talking. So that's going to be something over the next year or so as the usage density picks up. We're going to see how that plays out.
Be super interesting when you're number 73 for takeoff at Chicago and everybody's on Starlink, and you'll see, how the performance goes when you're over there on the taxiway.
That's really the main, can everybody stream that? That's the real risk / question everybody's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of being 73rd in line for takeoff at Chicago, that was me just a couple of days ago on the way back from the Freddie Awards. Richard, as you mentioned, the numerous delays that you've had over the course of the year. This leads us to this discussion about Newark, and there's sort of 2 separate buckets here to discuss. The obvious bucket is there are severe delays at Newark, and it's going to be a messy airport to get through over the next couple of months. But the secondary piece, which is starting to be talked about, is the safety concerns at the airport, just given how much is going on there and how complex it is. I guess let's take the first part first, Seth, which is how bad do you think it's going to be for the flying public to be flying in and out of Newark for the next couple months?
Or even like the quick background for the folks not familiar with what's going on right now and why it's so bad.
So there's a couple things going on there. One is, for years now, the New York airspace has been the most complicated, most complex, most challenging to manage, and has been one of the most understaffed from an air traffic control perspective. What's known as N90 is the sort of airport code for the control site that manages the New York City airspace in those 3 airports. New York 4, really, if you count Teterboro, but LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark. And those airports are very close together, have the potential for different winds and weather, so that the runway paths can sort of, instead of all being parallel to each other, can sometimes go against each other. Not good. You don't want planes flying into each other. And so managing that airspace has been challenging. It's truly one of the most difficult postings in the air traffic control world. And they were having trouble keeping it staffed. It's not, the best paying job. It's high stress, all of those things. And so the FAA last year decided, what if we take Newark away from the N90? We're going to move it down to Philly.
Right.
We've had better luck keeping that location staffed. It works a little better. We can have that team work those flights. And because if we separate them, it'll be more efficient. We'll have a better control, and we won't have all these air traffic control delays due to staffing challenges. That has not played out as the FAA expected. and that's the polite way of saying it. Basically, and there's been a couple of challenges. One is to make that work, and as some listeners might be aware, the ATC equipment is old. The network is old. There's a lot. It all works, but it's old. And so doing things like moving the radar from N90 down to Philadelphia wasn't just like, repointing the satellite or repointing the radar. It was taking the feed that is showing up on Long Island and taking a private line and running it down to Philadelphia and sort of like daisy chaining it along. And every now and then that line goes down. In my brain, the network guy in me is like, oh, shouldn't there be redundant systems? Shouldn't you have 2 lines through different systems and different drives?
Maybe 3.
Right, like all of those things.
What novel ideas?
I don't know if the hardware can't support it or what, because it's old and all those other things. But right now, that line goes down sometimes. And so there have been times where you have a radar outage, even though the physical hardware is working, because the folks in Philadelphia can't see the radar that shows up in N90. You also are still having staffing issues. There's a challenge that people didn't want to move from Long Island down to the Philadelphia area. So not all of the controllers went down along with this plan. Philadelphia was not fully staffed to begin with. And through all that, and now they've got extra responsibilities, and it's still a very complex and challenging airspace. It's been a challenge to keep that fully staffed. And so there are staffing triggers, they're called, but Philadelphia Area C is the area that covers New Jersey. And that has had, over the past year since this switch happened, a lot of understaffed shifts. And that has led to restrictions in the number of planes that can land and operate through the space.
What has happened in the last 2 weeks that has really brought this to, I would say, national media attention, in addition to just ground stops, basically?
Everywhere. And so 2 things have happened that I would say. One is earlier this year, actually started in February, the Newark Airport's one of the 2 main runways has been closed for construction. It was weekends only for the first 60 days. And since April 15th, it has just been closed. It is supposed to be closed through June 15th, 60-day window. Godspeed, y'all. Even if everything was fully staffed, there are too many planes scheduled to land with one runway closed. And they're trying to use 1129. That's that little cross runway at the northern end. For those who have been around way too long, you may recall when Continental brought in the 70-seat prop planes that they were going to use in and out of Newark because they could use that cross runway. And it, quote, wouldn't be affected by all the air traffic delays.
Sure.
Famous promises that did not live up to their hype in the aviation world. We're now sort of doing the same thing with that cross runway for all of these other planes landing. I gotta say, as a passenger, it's a sporty experience because you come down like you're landing normally and it does this sort of loop around.
I did that for the first time earlier this year, actually.
If you don't know it's coming, it's like, wait, what? No, the runway's over there, guys. What are we doing?
And then you're going right over the bridge too, and you're like, we're too close to this bridge. Where are we?
No, it is an exciting experience for sure. But that's supposed to help, and they're using that more than they do on a regular occasion. But when you have, even without thunderstorms, you can have a situation where you're down to maybe 30 arrivals an hour, and with storms and other things. This past weekend, we've seen arrivals down to 20, 22, 24 an hour, and they're scheduled for 30 to 40. And the math simply does not work. So yes, staffing is a challenge. There's been a lot of talk that has made significant news lately. That's the headlines you're seeing. And even post June 15th, when it becomes, weekend only on the runway construction again, you're going to still see problems there. But the construction right now, I think, is sort of has put it over the top in terms of absolute mess. And that's why on a daily basis, things are a mess. I'll be polite.
Well, and just to put things in perspective for folks listening in, Newark has, when all is said and done, has 3 runways, if I remember correctly. And for
parallels plus that one cross one.
Right. And so for perspective, Dulles has 4. I think JFK has 4 too, right?
JFK has 4, 2 parallel sets. LaGuardia is 2, just the perpendicular pair. But
and then
Atlanta has
airport
5.
Right, I'd say and then you get bigger airports like Atlanta's 5. O'Hare has 7 or 8?
18, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think O'Hare, if I remember correctly, it has 5 now parallel east-west plus 2 cross.
The 2 cross. Yeah. So when we talk about closing a runway at Newark, it's already a very busy airport without as many runways as other large key airports.
Yeah. And I will say, the other thing that hit the news, I think late last Friday, was United CEO Scott Kirby coming out and saying they're going to cut 35 daily round trips for the next, he didn't say for how long, but let's assume for at least the next 6 weeks while the construction's happening. And one of the interesting, and he wants to make sure that there's enough capacity. And obviously there's not 35 will help, depends on what time of day they're cut and things like that. But the other thing that he tossed into the letter that was sent out, which is of questionable taste, let's say, was a note that, quote, 20% of the controllers walked off the job.
So I've been seeing that. Where are we with this? Because I sent Ed a couple news clips again, I wasn't familiar with these, but are there controllers that say this is enough, I'm out? Because there are controllers apparently giving quotes saying it's unsafe for the Americans to fly into Newark. Like, where are we with reality on this?
So the 20% number, these are not people who quit, right? There were some, like I mentioned earlier, there's some who didn't necessarily transfer down as part of the move, but this isn't necessarily people who quit so much as the stress and chaos that has been part of working the Newark sector these days. A number of controllers have taken sick time and are, from the stress and the trauma. And again, you're controlling flights and all of a sudden your radar scope goes down and what the hell do you do? Right. Like this is not an easy job, even at the best of times. And to have it not, you're working 6-day-a-week shifts, forced overtime, long schedules, it wears on you. And some of them are taking a mental health break for very, very good and reasonable reasons. I would very much prefer that my air traffic controllers be confident and competent and relaxed and ready to go, not overstressed. And so that is a nationwide understaffing problem, but again, more pointed in the New York City area.
I've been hearing of this ATC understaffing for years now.
Yes.
And other industries who have this problem, this is going to be a very random example, but I feel like they're everywhere, is if you've seen the Build Submarines ads, which there was like a college football bowl game, they're sponsoring major national sporting and
they're up here. They're up here by me. That we got a Navy construction base.
Yeah. So Portsmouth up there. Yeah. And so I mean, you see this everywhere where they're like recruiting people nationwide to go become tradesmen to go build submarines. Why are we not seeing these national campaigns for ATC? Hey, we'll pay for your school, guaranteed job. Where is this grassroots? Is there one that I'm just not aware of? Like in the trade schools, in the high schools, in the universities, to come and staff up something that is obviously imperative to our daily infrastructure life as Americans. Why are we not seeing this?
There is some, and it's more around pilots and maintenance than it is air traffic control. But there are programs, high school programs and community college type programs that, and even actually four-year college programs related to these specialties on these jobs. The Department of Transportation does fund and partner with some of these programs, sort of grants and things like that to make it happen. And in recent years, there has been a push, and I say years, but especially this year again, there has been a push to, fund these programs, pay raises, give you more money while you're in training. It's a hard job. Not everybody who shows up makes it through the training. There's a decent washout rate, so that's
and
part
a
of
very stressful job too.
Yeah, it's a very stressful job. So not everybody wants to stick around, right? You can only start when you're under a certain age because they want to get 20 years out of you or whatever. But there's people who are taking retirement right at 20 years instead of working all the way to, I remember if it's 55 or 65, but there's a lot of things going on there, a lot of moving parts. And at some level, there's not enough training capacity. Even when they fully fill their training classes, that's still not enough to account for the retirements out at the top end. And so this last round of, we're going to actually finally spend the money and do it. And oh, by the way, it's part of the DOT budget. So it's annual, every year gets fought over in Congress. It's not a long-term budget. So blame the politicians, level above me, but, blame the politicians for that one too. But, I think ultimately what we've seen this last time around with the money is if you're eligible to retire, so I guess you hit your 20 years, but you're still not at your forced retirement age, they'll pay you a lump sum to stick around. And if you're new, you're getting a raise or a bump in salary, a bonus to sort of show up and start. The folks in the middle are kind of getting screwed and squeezed because they're the ones that are doing it. They're the ones that know what they're doing and have the, expertise and experience. And, we need them too, but they're not seeing any of this extra cash. So that's not a great look. But end of the day, like most things in life, it's all about the money.
Yeah, this is firmly, as far as my New York City commutes, Newark is completely off the possibilities for me for the foreseeable future, which is fine as, sticking to Delta. But I have been watching. I went back this morning, looked every single Delta flight into Newark. So, airline agnostic. I'm sure United is hurting the worst, but every single Delta flight, including, First South this morning, are already delayed a couple hours. So just,
I mean, this weekend in particular, interestingly, Atlanta yesterday actually had more delays, not cancellations,
Yeah.
than Newark did, just because the storms that blew through last night. So,
Big storms last night. Yeah. Glad I was not
you know,
flying.
and so that's the other thing is like, we're all focused on Newark. It's getting the attention. It's getting all the press. Like, our airspace is fragile. We don't have the ability to handle storms, and summer is coming, right? Like,
Well, I mean, I think DCA is a great example of this right now. After the crash a few months ago, they reduced capacity at certain times of day there, and
Yeah.
if everything's perfect, DCA runs okay, and if it's just a little bit off and they have to slow the pattern down, the airport can't recover. And to your point, like this isn't a problem that's going away.
No. And I don't know if you guys saw last Thursday or Friday, there was also a helicopter in the DC airspace that a couple of go-arounds. It's all safe. It's all what's supposed to happen.
Right.
No one is at risk. But again, that airspace with the helicopter traffic mixed in, even without the helicopters, it's very crowded and very challenging to fly it just because of the security zones and that single runway or primary runway and the number of flights operating. But you throw in the helicopters, you throw in some of the other complications, throw in a gentle breeze, and things start going sideways.
This is going to be one random nerdy question from the accident a few months ago, but you're probably the guy to know. If I recall correctly, either right before or after that, an American had to do a go around, and they blew right through the security zone straight over the top of DC.
Yeah,
which has always answered my question of, are there automatic missiles sitting on top of the Capitol ready to? But what is the recourse there? Was there any follow up that you read or heard about what happened to that plane or crew, or is it just, hey, this was?
I didn't hear any specific follow up. My guess is, like most things, we didn't have a choice. We were issued to go around. We hit the big button. Literally, there's a button. You hit take off, go around button. Your engines are set to go. You rock it up and you try to fix it. But depending on what else is going on in the flight deck, you don't necessarily worry quite as much about specific things like the security zone over DC as you do get up to altitude and make sure there's no other planes around you.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess the best way to take us out on this, Seth, we talked a little bit about this in pre-show. We know that the summer is going to be a mess, but thinking about New York specifically, it's easy just to say avoid New York and try to connect somewhere else. But for folks that do have to get in or out of New York, when do you think it gets better? And, is it better to just book into or out of LaGuardia or JFK through the rest of the summer?
So June 15th, the construction is supposed to finish on a daily basis. It'll continue on weekends a little past that. That will help. That will not help the staffing challenges. That will not help the weather challenges, but it will at least help having 2 runways available, or 3, I guess, now, if you think about it that way. So it'll get better there. That doesn't mean it will be good necessarily. That all said, LaGuardia and JFK are not always practical. They're not always affordable. They're not always reasonable, depending on where you're going and what you're doing.
Yeah.
As someone who lived in New York City for 18 years, equidistant from the 3 airports, at least sort of time-wise based on transit, I flew from all of them. They all suck differently.
Very true statement.
That's a great way
And
to say it.
there is no silver bullet, right? The winds go the wrong way, and JFK gets shut. Has to end up doing, only can use 2 of its runways instead of all 4. LaGuardia can only use 1 instead of both. You start having those things, conflicting airspace, and because the different runways sort of cross each other. There's no perfect answer here. There's some things that will eventually happen theoretically that will make the airspace able to be more automated and more useful, and so that we can operate better at all these airports, but none of those are going to happen anytime soon. So for the next 6 weeks, right through mid-June this year, I would 100% avoid Newark. I just don't think, if you can at all, try not to be there. Beyond that, good luck. There is no silver bullet.
My personal strategy for the rest of this year is going to be first flight out of the day, whether I'm coming or going.
Generally speaking, that works well. I will say I got burned on that a couple weeks back out of DC. DCA was fogged in the morning, and so the first 3 flights to Boston, of which I was on 1, all canceled. And in the afternoon, then Boston got weather, and the flight ended up that I was going to be rebooked on was like 8 hours late. It was a mess. I ended up on Amtrak.
Hello, Amtrak.
It was fine, but all things being equal, first flight, typically speaking, does better. Just statistics.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, the last 2 times I've been in New York, I had flights booked and ended up bailing for Amtrak, which was a easy solution for somebody who lives in DC. Obviously not available to folks who live much further away, but
Yeah.
I would absolutely say if you're on an Amtrak leg between here and New York, that's the way I'd choose for the summertime for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, Mr. Miller, it was good having you back on, even if most of what we talked about is not pleasant stuff for the summer. So
hey, cool Wi-Fi is fun to talk about.
It is, but it's not here yet. So
some of it is.
Ish.
September 3rd, gentlemen, September 3rd is the day that I fly an American E175 back. They are for sale now. I hope they're just.
Have you already booked it?
No, because the placeholder fares for economy right now are $1,280 one way. So I'm hoping those are just placeholder fares, and they just holding the slots, whatever they got to do from a regulatory standpoint. But because it's $94 the day before the flight start, and then $1,280 the day the nonstop starts. So hoping that those drop here any day soon.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Hope springs eternal, but I will say, having started to fly American a bit more than United this year, they price their flights in a lot of cases higher than United, and specifically, once you get down to the last seat or two in like the premium cabin, the fares go way up and make United's fares look tame. So I do think $1,280 is a placeholder for you, but given their current pricing strategy that I'm seeing, I'm not looking forward to seeing what your rates are going to be on that leg.
I also wonder, American, there's a number of markets these days, especially as the LCCs have been scaling back, where round trip pricing has come back into play. You don't get one-way pricing anymore as half the round trip. So pisses me off. But I had that the other day looking at a trip to Pittsburgh.
Massive on Delta right now. Delta has fully put that into play out of Atlanta. I mean,
even JetBlue is doing it in some markets. I know international. I think not domestic yet, but I think JetBlue wasn't, but Delta was in the Boston to Pittsburgh market. So I wanted to mix and match, and it blew the price because of that.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and knock on wood, because United hasn't done that on some of my major routes. And I mean, you guys know, for years, it's been let's all just book one ways because it's easier when things go sideways to cancel. And if it has to go back to round trips as a business traveler, that's going to suck.
It's for the last 3 months, I've had to nearly book round trip because it's like $600 one way or $700 round trip, Atlanta to New York. And I'm like, holy cow, what in the world?
All right. Well, as we said at the top of the show, you can find Mr. Miller at that disgustingly long handle that we'll put up on the screen for Blue Sky. I wish they'd find a way to make those Blue Sky handles shorter. But you should listen to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, because it is a fun and nerdy dive into the world of the aviation industry in a way that nobody else is really doing out there. So
no one else should. Please.
You have your niche, Mr. Miller. The honor.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, man.
I'm trying to think. Before we let you go, Seth, interesting travel coming up?
Yes. Going to the Paris Air Show later this summer, followed by a week in Wales.
Nice.
Yeah, something to do. And if things hold, JAL first class for Thanksgiving, JFK to Tokyo.
Very nice.
It's going to be a sweet ride.
A350 got 2 seats on awards.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Mr. Curry, you grabbed some pretty tasty awards just recently with that Air France KLM Flying Blue special that popped up a couple days ago. What did you grab, Copenhagen?
Yeah, since SAS started that Atlanta to Copenhagen nonstop, I think about 6 months ago now, I've had an eye on that flight for a long time. And I've actually passed that gate several times, eyeballing that A330, be like, I'm going to figure it. But they have not, very stingy on award space since they launched that flight. But this week, they now are opened 2 business class seats per flight pretty much, every other day in July. So I was able to get my son and I on July, and then the very next day, my wife and daughter will fly. And it was 45,000 Flying Blue miles for business one way per person, and only $34 in YQ. So I was all over it. So family trip to Copenhagen in July. Excited about it.
Yeah, I actually got lucky and found a flight that had 4 seats, and we were looking for a way back from Europe after that great Virgin Atlantic sale earlier this year. So I was able to grab 4 seats to Boston for, if you can believe it, 140,000-ish Air France KLM Flying Blue points one way. I've got a position from Boston to Dulles, but never going to find anything that cheap for the return from Europe. So European vacation is set. I'll be interested to see what Seth thinks of JAL first class. Well, we do need to have you back on before Thanksgiving. Mr. Kerr, we'll have to talk about the right strategy for Legoland and all the reserve ride options you have.
And enjoy the hot dogs in Copenhagen.
I will. They're going to, free bike rentals and a lot of hot dogs in my future.
Right? All right. Lots of fun travel for all of us. Can't wait to talk a little bit more about my Japan trip from a couple weeks ago, which we still have not caught up on. But till we upload again, we've got miles to go.
Why am I comfortable on a single aisle plane? Oh, that's right. It's old. Why? Ashtrays. You could just